Well, this semester I'm teaching a graduate seminar on punishment and prison reform, and sort of the traditional things philosophers do. Philosophers are not interested really in sort of describing the way things are. Philosophers are always interested in critiquing the way things are and trying to figure out whether we should be trying to change the way things are. And the slant philosophers have traditionally taken on the question of legal punishment is it justified? Often we just sort of take it for granted that, well, of course, you know, we have prisons, people do crimes, they go to prison, it's just like a natural fact of life. And philosophers point out, well, no, it's not a natural fact of life, it's sort of a social construct. It's choices that we make to deal with things that we characterize as crimes. And so the first kind of question philosophers ask is, are we justified in punishing people at all? I mean, the paradox of punishment is, if somebody kidnaps someone, we say that's a crime, and then we respond by essentially kidnapping them, right? And that's a paradox. And how do you solve that paradox? Well, there's a number of ways of solving that paradox, and we're looking at a whole bunch of different ways. And we're starting off tonight, actually, by looking at sort of retributivist views. And these are views which basically say, sort of metaphorically, that punishment should sort of rebalance the scales. Somehow the crime put things out of whack, and the purpose of punishment is to put it back together. So part of what philosophers like to do, of course, we first of all find topics that are really important, really compelling. It's really important to get clear about them. And then the next thing what we want to do is we want to get clear about them. We want to sort of figure out how to categorize them. And then the next thing we want to do is we want to critique them. And for these, we want to figure out what they are, sort them out. We might find ourselves, as we look through this list, saying, gee, you know, that's not distinguishable from that. So we'll erase one as part of sort of the categorizing. As we think about justification, we might say, boy, that fails as a general justification. Or we might say, you know, okay, I could see that as a general justification, but wow, when we think about certain kinds of crimes, it doesn't work at all.
Whatever has been incurred upon the victim because of the offender, some kind of repayment is looked at to compensate, or some kind of way of dealing with the actual harm done.
It seems like, because they talk about repayment to society, that he needs to repay his debt to society or pay for his crimes, and it seems like if they really wanted to repay society, that you'd want something, instead of imprisonment, you'd want something more like community service, or something that was actually a benefit to society versus just a punishment to the prisoner.
I was going to say that maybe when it comes to like white-collar crimes, it's easier when you have something that you can actually quantify. But once when you get into problems of actual harm done, and when you have to deal with what the notion of a person is, and more difficult items like that, it seems like that's where there's main issues.
So we might then just say that repayment, as Cunningham says, repayment is the basic notion. By itself, it's just not enough.
He deserves to be punished, you know. That's just, you know, it's right. He did wrong. It's, you know, he deserves it. But they also seem to kind of tie together with that. And the rule theory, the satisfaction theory, and the fair play theory, to me, it all kind of seems to be the, well, if these are the rules we have to play by, and if I have to play by those rules, and nobody lets me get away with it, by golly, I'm not going to let them do it either. And it's just that, and they all kind of seem to tie together there in the...
As philosophers learn how to sort of think about anything, and they learn how to sort of sit down and sort of take an issue apart and sort of, you know, figure out what the relative strengths and weaknesses are of different positions, and then argue, you know, coherently and articulately for one or another of them. And I thought that since I was sort of in college during the Vietnam War, and it seemed to me that sort of social transformation was important, and I didn't especially want to be, you know, doing it by taking up arms, or, I mean, you know, some of the other ways that one traditionally thinks about social transformation were unpleasant to me. So I thought it would be really good to sort of be, you know, get the kind of skills that I would need to be able to argue for social transformation.